Right. All right. So we are in First Peter chapter 1. No, I'm sorry, chapter 2. If you want to move down there. Last week we were started this kind of the series that Peter is going through, talking about our interactions with the world. And he's going to go over different ways we should be interacting with, the different roles. Shortly after this, he'll be talking about how servants should interact with people. He's going to talk about how wives should interact with their family and or their husbands, and husbands should interact with their wives, and children how they should interact. Anyways, all of these things, but he's starting off by talking about how we should think of ourselves, and we talked about this last week in verse 11, that it starts off in verse 11, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims. So there's this thinking that we need to think of ourselves in this way as a pilgrim or as a sojourner. And then we're going to start this week in verse 13, and he's going to talk about our interaction with the government, which is really interesting. So I think that we should have some fun little discussions as we go through that. But before we do that, let's start reading verse 11 through 17. And we'll start with 11. We already went through 11 through 12, 11 and 12, but it'll be good to get some context in there. Um, John, are you up for reading?
Absolutely. You said 2:11 through 17?
Yeah, that's correct.
Copy that. First Peter 2:11. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation. 13. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God, that with well doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
Interesting. Yours says maliciousness in there in verse 16. We'll have to get to that. That's a, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll start.
vice.
Go
I have
ahead.
vice. I have
Vice. Yeah, mine says vice as well. And
yeah.
then when I click on it, it says some say wickedness. All right, let's start in for 13. Peter starts this off great. Therefore, submit yourself to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. So he's talking about that we should submit to the ordinances, that is the rules and the government, I'm sorry, the laws that are set up by mankind. And I think there's a whole bunch that we can talk about right here. And first of all, if we look back at verse 11, Peter mentions that we are sojourners and we are pilgrims. We talked about this a little bit last week, how if you are a citizen of one country and you go into another country, you have to live by the rules of that other country. You don't have all of the freedoms that you have from your first country. If you're in America, in the United States, and you go to Brazil, you don't necessarily have the freedom of speech in Brazil because you're in a different country. You don't have, so you have to live by the rules that are there. And so Peter is saying something similar, that you need to go where you're at, you need to recognize that you're under the authority of the government. Good morning, Charlie.
Right.
We're in Second Peter chapter 2. We're at verse 13 right now.
Right.
I'm sorry, First Peter.
First Peter.
I,
We'll get
I
it.
have to apologize. My brain is really foggy. I'm recovering from a cold. So if you guys help me out, I'd appreciate it. Call out when I say something dumb. More than normal. Anyways, so there's this aspect that we have to understand, that we're not citizens of this world in the same manner that we're citizens of the Lord. We have a lot of freedoms and a lot of grace and mercy that because we belong to the Lord, and we can't just take that and think that we have those same freedoms when we're here in the United States, or when we're here in the world, in whatever government we belong to. But then there's this other idea where it says, submit yourselves to every ordinance. I think there's this idea that Peter wants us to understand that it's not our job as followers of Jesus to instigate rebellions and war against the government. The government isn't our enemy. In fact, when we read verse 11 and 12, he said, we don't war against them, we war against our flesh. It is the flesh that wars against the soul. So it's really, that is our battle, that is our war, and that's where we need to be concerned mostly about, is about the heart, and if the heart is trying to go after its own desires. And so he says submit here in that sense, that again, our main priority is not necessarily instigating rebellion and setting up government. There's the possibility that as Christians, we could do something like this, right? We could rebel against the government, and let's say we were 100% successful and we set up our own government here on earth. We would still totally fail, because there are going to be plenty of people in this government who do not follow the Lord, who aren't followers of Jesus, and they're still going to follow after their own flesh. It doesn't matter what laws we set up, it doesn't matter what rules we set up, they are still going to follow after their own flesh. And so
Did that already happen?
exactly, that's exactly
We
right.
had a war. We get away from them. It was basically founded by Christians and deists and people that least feared God, and it was pretty good, better than most, maybe better than any. Now look what's happened
Sure.
because
Are you
it's
talking about the Revolutionary War?
yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's the men who run the government, not necessarily the rules.
Right.
And even with the people running the government, we can be perfect in what we are thinking and what we're trying to do. It doesn't necessarily impact people's hearts. And this is really where the war is people's hearts. It's not in the political structure of the world. However, um, I think it's worth pointing out that doesn't mean we have to refrain from being involved in the political structure, but we don't want to conflate these two things together. If we are successful in setting up a perfect government or something we think is the ideal government, that's not how we win the war against the flesh or the war against sin. And so we just have to recognize that. Um, man, there's something else like I keep wanting to say, and I can't remember what it was.
And Paul is writing this, excuse me, Peter is writing this to some Jewish Christians, had their own 600 and some odd rules that
Yeah.
didn't fit with the rules of the day of the Roman Empire.
And that's what I was going to mention, which is it turns out that Jesus is compatible with every type of government, in the sense that you can follow him regardless of the structure or the form of the government that's ruling. You can follow him. It might be more difficult, but you can still be a follower of Jesus in a place like North Korea or in China or in India. And all of these places, you can still follow him. Being a follower of Jesus is not dependent on the government, on the earthly government that you're under. All right. Any comments before we move on? I think this is interesting. We're going to get to
And
some really cool things.
I
Go
think
ahead.
I just want to acknowledge or put out there that I think that it remains for me an enormous ethical question. I mean, as let's say the founding fathers of this country, I believe they are more than deists. We just try to suppress their Christianity in our modern history.
Mm.
Some of them, sure, but I think we believe our historians far too much. The major ones that we're familiar with, or at least, but for them, I couldn't imagine the struggle that they had to go through
It would be
as
difficult.
Christians. Yes. and the ethical questions before them. The and for me, let's say you are, I think, military. I often ask, are we called to not serve as well? Are we called are we called to not take up arms? But some of these are answerable, and people have, and they've reconciled and they get comfortable. But in the end, I just say that I think it is an extremely difficult question,
Absolutely.
and it's easy to say, "This is it. I'm moving on." Now, granted, as I kind of exchanged earlier in the week with others, no matter how much I struggle with the question, if I say yes, it means yes. I'm
Yeah.
committed.
Yeah.
And if somebody says charge that hill, I'm not going to be sitting there, well, gee, should I? Because, no, I made a commitment. And right or wrong, I think yeses are yeses. I think the Bible does teach me that. So just
I
enough.
think there's some great things that you're talking about there that we can talk about more, and we will,
I
because
just
I
wanted to
have
throw it
some
out there.
questions. But
Yeah.
let's talk about the next point first, and then
hmm
circle back to some of the things that you're bringing up, Eric. And that is, he says, excuse me, therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. And I just want to bring this up because I think this is important. I love what he's saying here. Peter is pointing out that our primary loyalty is still to the Lord, and we're following the Lord by submitting to the authority that's been put over us. And I think that this is a great distinction to bring up, because the reasons that we are doing this is because of our loyalty to the Lord, not necessarily because of our loyalty to our government. And that's important because it may look externally, again, this may look the same. It may look like, hey, you're doing the same type of thing, but the difference is I'm doing it because I'm doing it to the Lord. I'm submitting to him, and he set up a government over me, and I'm submitting to that government. And so there's a heart of this where we're still following what the government is telling us to do, but we're doing it because we're submitting to the Lord, not to necessarily the authority over us, which makes it a little interesting.
Mhm.
It's interesting in the exile when the Lord told it was Judah, I guess, to be submit to Nebuchadnezzar in no uncertain terms, not rebel against him. Yet Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, when it came to their religious practices, that they were faithful, and they said, "No, we can't obey this law." So it wa- that goes right into this discussion.
Sure. And
So,
and it also means that if you're a follower of the Lord, if you're following Jesus, some people might not fully trust you because they recognize that your loyalty isn't to their plan for what they have for the government to do. It's your loyalty is to follow the Lord, and you will do that. And if the government is saying fits under what the Lord is calling you to do, then that's fine. But if it's not, then we're going to stand up and say, sorry, I can't do that. And that makes it difficult for some people.
Well, yes, even as Steve mentions, the exile being told that you must surrender and walk out the gates. That I mean, it doesn't go just one way. I mean, take up arms or drop arms. It's if God tells you this, yes, follow it. And could you imagine? Again, yeah, it's not one or the other. It's if you are a zealot and you see your brothers, godly brothers, saying no, God's told us to walk out those gates and submit. The struggle from from brother to brother uh, would have been enormous.
I think what you're pointing out, Eric, is something that's very interesting if you look at the Civil War, because during the time of the Civil War, there were people who felt like they were called to fight for whichever side they were supposed to fight for specific reasons.
Mm,
And so they did that, and they were fighting against other brothers. They were fighting against other followers of Jesus, which makes it really interesting because then here comes the question, if you're can you be on both sides of politics and struggle against each other and still be brothers in the
brothers.
Lord?
And a lot of
Can
those
you
Civil
do
War
that?
people were
Yeah.
the leaders. All right, so I'm going to throw us into then the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay.
Imagine the struggle there. The Jews were not a unified people. They were highly divided, and this is where the notion of zealots is also enormous. We're being pressed by evil people. That's what this passage is saying. Submit to them.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the fact that these are people who knew Jesus. Many of them, I shouldn't say all,
Yeah. Yeah.
and struggles there. We got it easy in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Read
Oh yeah.
Bonhoeffer. Read Bonhoeffer and see how hard it can get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
This brings up one of the questions that I have written down here, which is, do you think it is permissible to rebel against the government, or are we supposed to always submit to the government? Um, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think
Well,
if the
Because here's what
government,
Peter says, therefore submit yourselves.
there's a two-word answer. It depends.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
if
What
in
about
our government, we're the sovereign under God, the people, because it's elected representatives and sometimes even direct initiatives. It's from state to state that under the Constitution of the country and the Constitution of the states, that's our governing document. When we take oaths of office at every level, you don't pledge yourself to the elected officials. You pledge yourself to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of fill in the blank
mm,
at every level. If it's a state or city, it's the United States and the Constitution of the state. And if it's federal, it's just the Constitution of the United States. So since we're the sovereigns, we get to decide. We get to decide, but that's why we have elections.
Yep.
so there's a great point here, what you bring up, Steve, which I think is worth pointing out. Some governments are set up so that the only way to change the government is to overthrow the government. That's the only way. If
But
you have a
legally,
king,
but
right?
legally
Well,
by vote.
no, there are,
No,
that's for
Or
our country,
but
but
if
there
it's
are
a
some countries
right,
where
but if
you
it's a
cannot.
dictatorship, the king and they're slaughtering people, at some
The
point the
only
people
way
have
to change that, that's right, the only way to change that government is to overthrow it. If you have a
yeah.
king and they have all authority, then the only way to make a change is to overthrow that king. That's actually the way those governments are designed. However, our government is not designed that way. If you want to change the government, there are lots of other ways that you can have influence over how our government works and affect change without actually having rebellion. And so for us, we're in a great spot where it's a lot easier for us to impact how the government functions than it is in some other places. We can do this without having to rebel, which is pretty amazing.
And it's demonstrated.
Yeah.
It it's beautiful. But all right, so I'll press in this direction, but stop me if it's. I mean, I had was it 4 years ago? I think there was a tremendous amount of frustration. And I think shutdowns created that with some individuals that were very godly people that I would look to for every behavioral example. But should we take up arms? Was frankly just a cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Two in particular come to mind. Many conversations, and it's like, wait a minute. We kind of it's a form of laziness and pride that says let's take up arms when something bad happens.
Yeah.
and some bad oppressions happening. And it's amazing to me. To me, I felt it that I never felt that way. If I really felt that important, I mean, that it was that critical, I would have spent years and years engaged. But frankly, most of us are unengaged. And then
That's
suddenly
true.
something bad happens and we get angry.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think therein is the behavioral thing. So it is our hearts that, as you say, that matter so much more. And our pride wants to fix things. And that's doesn't make it easy, but
And sometimes we get caught up in fixing things that we think, which actually we know are good, but
mhm,
aren't necessarily beneficial. Sure, there are. I'll just give a weird example. My family, my kids are homeschooled, and they go to these homeschool things. And there are some people who are very political, and they say, if you are homeschool, you cannot be part of a charter school. You have to be 100% homeschool because you're letting the state influence your thing. And they will even tell you you're living in sin if you are part of a charter school,
Well,
which is
just think if you sent your
which
public school,
I
boy,
oh well
you're
definitely
heading.
there's some.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
But the
that's
point
like,
is that what they want to do is they want to influence and make a change so that the funding that comes from the state goes with the child no matter which school they belong to. And so that's the political direction that they want to go to, so that you don't have to be part of a charter school. You can be fully on your under your parents at a homeschool and be funded by the government.
in
But
some states you can now, but not here.
and that is a good thing. I would agree. I think that that would be very beneficial and helpful. And actually, I think it'd be helpful for children in general, because they don't have to be stuck with whatever school they're stuck with. But at the same time, winning that battle, I don't know that that impacts people's hearts, right? That we're talking about the way the government functions, we're talking about the funding of it, some things where I could not see getting dogmatic about it because what does that change in
Well, I could
somebody's
see,
heart?
I could see somebody being called to try to make that change. Wilberforce and others were called to end slavery. Lincoln took a bullet for that. Uh,
Yeah.
but but to say that someone who just doesn't want to go that far is a sinner, that's just, I think you're getting out there. And on the other foot, people who are called to be in politics, whether as a candidate, to hold office, to work or to get somebody elected, or for someone to say they're being ungodly because they're doing that, that to me, that's off the table too. God doesn't call everybody to do the same thing.
amen.
And we brought up the Civil War. He can call people to be on different sides of something as well. And we're still brothers, and we still need to treat other brothers like that, which is hard sometimes. Okay, real quick question. What about the Revolutionary War? What do you think about those guys? Were they following this submit yourselves to every ordinance of man when they rebelled against the king? Or do you think that they were, where do you think they were on this? It's a hard one.
Well, God established his nation, so I guess we were on the right side.
Okay.
But yeah, but for the individual, that's a tough question. It was a tough question for them to
I
take
mean, I
up
think it's
arms
worth
against the
pointing out
king.
that they did attempt to engage with the king within the rules they did ask for. The whole thing did start with taxation without representation, and they tried to get the king involved in that discussion and the legislator involved in that discussion. But it is a tough one. My personal take is if you want to engage in something like that, you have to be willing to face the consequences of something like that. And you can't assume that just because you are you are doing what the Lord has called you to do, doesn't necessarily mean that he's guaranteeing success. There was a possibility, right, that the Americans did not succeed in the Revolutionary War. It would have been very different.
What? And I'm sorry, and so where my mind's going on, like I put out that these are difficult questions because I don't have answers to them, and if fold in that people are not all called the same as Steve, so
Sure.
there's no formula for this.
And
But
and
one
what
thing,
if
one aspect of what they were faced with was the remoteness, and you compare that to a deist versus a Christian. This notion that God is not really engaged, and how we feel differently, that God is with us. Well, the government was not really engaged other than to take, but there was no real relationship
Yeah.
with the government, so to speak. So the parallel there make it kind of highlights a
Okay.
different aspect of the struggle
I like
and
it.
why, people do want to be in control of their own destiny, etc., with regard to all the efforts they put into their work when they start to businesses. Most of these people were business people, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that in a very positive sense. So it's oh, I just have this problem here. Response? Is it easy? No, I have no answer to that question. I don't even know I mean, I do not know what I would do.
Yeah. Sure. I understand.
and what if you're a German citizen in the late 1930s? There's a line that is crossed that you can't follow the government anymore.
I mean, that's true. And Peter mentions some of these things, right? You're supposed to honor all. I think actually what it says is honor all, verse 17. And no, I would agree with you. There are truly in periods of times and different locations some really difficult questions that you have to answer when when walking with the Lord and your government decides to do something. There are some really genuinely hard questions, and I, I'm bringing this up again. Sometimes we don't all come to the same conclusion. They're not necessarily obvious answers,
Right.
and we have to be gracious with others who do not come to the same conclusion. And I think this is an important lesson here, is we have to be gracious. I love the concept that we can talk and speak ideas, and
Yeah.
the validity of the idea is what wins the hearts and helps you make the decisions. And it's not done by force. Now, I know that this isn't always the case and it's not always an option, but in general, we should, especially with other brothers, with other followers of Jesus, we should be able to have a conversation and communicate and discuss the idea to see, hey, really, what is the Lord calling us to do?
One thing I tend to do though, I get very frustrated with biblically ignorant Christians. I prayed about it. Yeah, but in this chapter, in this verse of this book, it says no. So
Yeah,
you
Yeah.
better, be a Berean, study to show yourself approved on any topic.
Right.
sure,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know,
Well, I think the aspect of
your
debate,
kids, the way you do your job, whether or not you're going to be politically involved. So,
I,
somebody
I,
said something?
yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is where the aspect of debating or the issue, the debate discussions work work well. They've kind of gone downhill, obviously, in the last years or so. But and just to your point, Steve, that you get somebody who's also, well, let's call them biblically ignorant, okay, and you get somebody who's biblically smart, and they can sit and discuss the issues, and not necessarily that they'll change their minds, but those around them listening to it will go, "Oh, okay, you're right. I've never known or seen that in the Bible," and you know, and I just think that's really important that the discourse or discussions happen, even like this, our group here, we're talking about
Yeah.
it. Like, okay, was everything done right? No, it wasn't. Because the nice thing is we have the mirror, and we have, we've seen the outcome, that what happened back then and where it is now. And I think, that helps to set how we approach future problems, discussions, conflicts, whatever they might be.
Right.
Well,
You know,
there's something extremely beautiful in that, and I really think it touches to the heart of it, because God is after hearts. He's not after nations.
right.
And even if I were a German soldier in 1930 and I made the commitment, I would probably still be in that war fighting Americans and Russians, etc. It imagine being Babylonian soldier. If we claim that there are Christians in Jericho, not Christians, Jews in Jericho's times. I can't think of the woman's name, or
Rahab.
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 There was a lot of
Yeah.
discussion. Oh, there had to be a lot of Christians there. Well, there was probably Christians even amongst Chaldeans and Babylonians. What if they said, "No, I'm not going to fight"? I'm obviously exaggerating the possibility and the point, but God didn't want it. God said that the Babylonians and well, let's say they are my instrument. They are my hand. They have my authority. To us as individuals, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
We cannot work it all out, and we have to trust God. So in a lot of ways, it really, to quote the great Bill Murray, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter if we really look down to it. So I'd be more inclined with that kind of thinking to go, no, I'm not going to take up arms against Britain, ahead of time, and I'd be on that side. But when I lost, I would have to submit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just playing it out a little here, gaming it out. And in the end, it is the heart of the individual, no matter what side they find themselves on, that matters. And obedience to God doesn't look the same.
Absolutely. And honestly, people do not understand this, right? They struggle with this. They think if I'm following the Lord and you're following the Lord, we should look exactly the same. And that's not the way the world works. It's really it's really interesting that God does things this way.
Yeah.
I want to let's read verse 14. He says, I'm going to start back. I'm going to read verse 13. Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether as to the king as supreme, or to the governors, to the governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. So there's what Peter is pointing out here is that we are supposed to submit to the king or to the governments or to any authority that's been set over us because they have a job that has been decreed by the Lord. And their job, and it's really interesting, he points out this is the role of the government here to punish for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of what is good. And I think there's an interesting point here that we should understand. In general, this is God's purpose for government. Now, government does a lot of other things. They can get involved in a whole bunch of other things. And I think all of that is ancillary. It's all a side note to God's purpose for how he uses government, which is to punish the evildoers and bring praise to those who do good. And I think this is an important thing for us as Christians to recognize because I think this is where God is telling us how we should be involved in our government as well. Is the goal is to make sure that there is justice and there is punishment for evildoers and make sure we are praising those who do good. And here's the catch to all of that. Man doesn't know what is evil and what is good without the Lord. And us being involved in that aspect of it is very helpful because we can help define what is good and what is evil. And that in itself is something that I think we can be fully engaged in our government by saying, hey, this is what's evil and this is what's good.
Yeah, I think, John, following to that, I think because we're the sovereign people, the citizens of 18 and over, that we have not only the right, if you will, but also the responsibility to govern. And you need to govern, you need to be informed if you're a Christian, and you need at the very least to go vote for the candidates and the issues on if it's like an initiative or some local thing. And do that. If you don't do that, then again, don't complain about the elected people because you didn't participate.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
think, oh, go ahead. Go
I
ahead,
was
John.
I was
John,
going
go
to
ahead,
say
John.
the unfortunate thing is after being around a lot of these 18-year-olds and preteens, there's not a lot between the ears of a lot of
Yeah,
people
Their
that
well,
brain is
need,
still developing.
they're not, like you
but
said, you
that's
got to be
the
informed, right?
well, since we
They're
back
not
in the
very
if you guys
informed.
are old enough to remember, some of you might be, it was 21 to vote and to drink. And because of Vietnam and all the draft, they decided, well, we're asking 18-year-olds to go put their lives on the line, they should be able to vote. And but we were smart enough to still in most states not let them drink
Right.
legally anyway. But
Oh,
that's but it is, yeah, but very
yeah, between the TikTok and
as
the
a group
social
not as well
media.
informed or
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think we as Christians are not, I don't know if the word isolation ever even is really that mentioned that much, you know. We're to be out in the world. And like to your point, Steve, yeah, we need to be informed. And when there's something that's there, we need to vote on it. We need to state our voice on it. And like John said, that's how our country's set up. We vote and that's how we move things around. We don't go around murder kings and all their people, their families that go with it.
So this
All
brings
right.
up this begs the question, which I think we understand where Steve's coming from, but this begs the question: are Christians supposed to be political? Are Christians supposed to be involved in the political process? What do you guys think about that?
The ones
I
that
would
are
ask the
called,
counter question,
you
does the
mean beyond
Bible
voting?
suggest we shouldn't? No,
Does it
and I don't
suggest we
think
shouldn't?
I don't think the Bible suggests that we shouldn't. I think Steve was outlining something that really highlights the difference. We are called, if we are truly, um, for lack of a better word, submitting to the Constitution, we are called by our government to be active.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think about how many
So
major changes that have happened in this country on the backs of Christians that were willing to stand up either against the status quo and because the Bible spoke differently to what the government was saying. And I think eventually, if the government's not doing what the Bible says, that is kind of our job as Christians to we put the Bible first. That is our constitution or our script or whatever you want to call it. Um, and when the government or the powers that be start going against it, then it is time to kind of just stand up and say, hey, I'm Christian. I follow Jesus, not you.
But in the reflection here is the Civil War is clearer than the Revolutionary War from my armchair. I can
sure,
say that. Because we were citizens with, what do you call it? Citizen kings. And
sovereigns.
we
Yeah,
were called to engage by both our government and our God. So in a lot of ways, it was quote unquote simpler. But
Yeah.
the lives are much, as John, you said, I mean, just take Lee. I mean, my gosh, what an amazing man that guy was. It's the struggles that went on left him on an entirely different side of the battle.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway,
And that's also an interesting way to look at things. I'm just thinking historically back to the Civil War, just the whole abolition movement. That whole thing came from Christians. It came from those who were saying, "Hey, morally, you have to treat people as people, regardless of anything else. They're still people." And that whole thing came from people looking at passages like this, which verse 17, which says, "Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king." And we haven't got to that part of the passage yet, but it just points out how those who love the Lord and follow the Lord and are engaged in the world, they have the ability to say, "Hey, this is right and this is wrong." And that makes a big difference. And some of these abolitionists, they were not Americans. They could be from other different countries. And yet that was a movement that ended up impacting our government because people started realizing, hey, yeah, this is morally wrong. This is evil. This is not good or right. And so they changed. The government ended up changing because of that. And I think this is a good point for us to understand, which is we are, as Christians, especially in the United States, where it says submit to the government, and our government says you need to vote and you need to be involved. We do need to be involved, and specifically, we need to be involved in those areas where they're outlining what is right and what is wrong. All right.
Amen.
I'm gonna throw in when the
Yeah,
Bible
do it.
the Bible teaches me that I think this yes means yes is very important. I mean Joshua and the go good good starts with a G.
Gibeonites.
Yes, Gibeonites. Yeah, they swindled, but Joshua was said, "Look, we made a commitment,
Yeah.
even though we were swindled into it." And they respected it. Now, granted, they made them slaves, but
Well,
it's
but
kind of
I think
ironic.
the
But
big,
but
yeah,
it's those yes means yeses
yeah,
are really what start building the blocks of war as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
these lives, the lives of every individual is extremely complicated, and they're in a different environment, and their life is built up where certain directions are laid out for them. It's a fascinating study,
Yeah.
and to really consider, because we could ask questions on and on and on, no matter how simple we think anything might be. We can show how complicated it really is underneath when we're talking about the hearts of men involved in, for lack of a better word, political affairs.
Yeah. It is what you're bringing up is it is worth pointing out that for us, when we look at the Civil War, the main point was slavery, but that wasn't the case for everybody. The main point for a
Right?
lot
It
of
wasn't
people
the case
was
with me.
states' rights versus the federal government,
Yeah.
and because of
Yeah.
that, they could end up in a
Remember, it's the
different
United
path.
States of, yeah.
So
Yeah, because it was the states were sovereign. The states created the Union. The Union didn't
yeah,
create the states. And it was we were much closer to the founding, and the states' rights were really important. But as a Christian, it's like we're going to fight over slavery, and we're going to use states' right as our uh, as our curtain. I think I'm moving to Pennsylvania
well, that's what I'm pointing
because you
out.
know
I don't think
slavery
everybody
was an
was
issue
thinking
before
that
the
way.
Revolutionary War.
It
Say
was.
it was an issue before the Revolutionary War because that's why you had so many free states. You know, Pennsylvania, the Quakers were in and were very dominant, very important, and William Penn. There's not any slavery here. You know, so
I'm
But
just bringing up
there's,
the point, Steve,
you
where
know,
I
I
think.
think,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
no, I was going to take it in a slightly higher dimension.
Do it.
This also relates to our philosophies on free will. Um, I'm
Mm,
sorry, I don't have Jonathan Edwards' treatise. Uh, is just quite the philosophical journey to take, and I believe he concludes that free will's an illusion.
Hmm.
You take this discussion and we think that we can say this direction good, this direction bad. It's really what God is doing. And each
Yeah.
individual, go back to even your earliest comments, Steve, our callings are different. God's orchestrating this, frankly. I mean, beyond, outside of ourselves, God's orchestrating everybody.
Right.
And
But if you,
we're going to
yeah,
have wars. It's
but
inevitable.
oh, that's for sure. But if you're
Yeah.
a Christian, there's certain lines that the Bible should keep you from crossing.
Yes, but
Like,
I think there's tons of, there are infinite lines that can be within godliness compared to the simple lines we construct to say you've ended up on the right side or the wrong side. I would defy that any of our given moments is clear. This is why we pray.
yeah, but
We
God
depend
also
on God.
purposefully uses evil. God often purposely uses evil to move history in the direction he wants it to move. And
Yes.
even though he's even said, well, I'm going to do this, but boy, I'm going to punish them after they do it. I'm going to use this country to, I'm going to use Assyria, I'm going to use Babylon to punish Israel and Judah. But boy, those guys are going to get it for doing what they're going to do. And
So I think
then your mind explodes and you realize you don't get it. You can't understand it.
so. Sorry, I'm getting excited, so I keep jumping in. Sorry. What we're discussing, the way we're discussing this, I think, not I think, this also shows that it is really easy to conflate two different things, because the reality of it is we are supposed to do what is right. We are supposed to do what is good. And sometimes God will convict us on a certain aspect where we end up on one certain side of of the government, and the certain side where we end up on another certain side of the government. But the reality is, whichever side wins and becomes the ruling authority, that doesn't actually matter. God's going to be the one who's in control. He's going to be the one who's controlling the government. Our job is not necessarily to be on the right side of, or what will be perceived as the right side of a particular government organization. Our job is to follow the Lord and show what is true and right and show what is evil and bad. And sometimes it's complicated because there are sides that they've got some aspects which are good and bad, and then you got other side which has got some aspects which are good and bad, and you're like, the Lord's telling me to pick this side, and I'm picking that side. But the reality is, again, the ruling authority doesn't matter because we don't live in this kingdom. And I think this is what Peter is pointing out. This is not our home. We are pilgrims. We are sojourners. We are in the kingdom of God, which is different than the kingdom of the United States of America, or different than the kingdom of whatever country you belong to. And so we have to be careful about saying, this is the right side and this is the wrong side, because really what it comes down to is this is what is evil and this is what is bad, and I'm sorry, evil and this is what is good. And I've yet to see any government where they're accurate on both of those accounts.
Uh, just, is there such thing as an evil nation and a non-evil nation? No, I think as you were, I'm going to provide the answer real short on time. You said it up front.
Yeah.
And I do think it goes back to the hearts of men, wherever we're placed. Because if God doesn't care about nations, they mean nothing to him. They have no soul.
Yeah.
It's not the nation. It's the individuals in the nation. And I've placed you there. And if I was wearing an Iron Cross for the German army, I'd feel a little more comfortable. SS? No, I would rather die, right? But it's clear now, but I'm sure it would have been clear then too. That this is evil.
Just to give the cannon fodder, to give the cannon fodder a break, I wonder, at least at the beginning of World War II, in Europe, if the average infantryman had any idea the extent of what Hitler was up to. That's another issue.
And it would be an interesting discussion because I think the quick answer would be no, you'd still have to submit. Yeah, but again, I just don't think we can look back on history and simplify it and suggest that there was a clear answer for any individual in that who's just a piece, that all things are really orchestrated by God, including evil, as John said
Yeah.
earlier. So we either trust God or we don't. And the other interesting part would be trusting God can look a lot like indifference to other people.
Sure.
But those who trusted God were probably far more effective in whatever they did. Right. So I'm sorry. It's mind
No,
blowing
no,
to think about.
I, we got 3 minutes, so we got to start wrapping up. But just to bring it back to our current environment, I have heard many times that people are fighting for the soul of our nation, and I cringe every time I hear that because my thought is, what does that even mean? I don't care about the soul of our nation. It's the soul of the people that live here. It is, if there is a revival because of our political environment, that would be amazing. It turns out, though, there
Yes.
could still be a revival if the political climate changes in a different direction too. And that is, I want to be involved in the government and to the degree where we are attempting to reach people's hearts, but not fight for the government in the sake of the just for the government. I mean, if the United States changes, it's changed all the time. It's always constantly changing its political views on all sorts of things. I'm less interested in that. I mean, I am interested, to be honest and to be fair. I can get very political, but the reality is that's not eternal. It is people's hearts that are the eternal aspect of what's going on here. And I know none of you disagree with that. All right. Any last comments before we wrap it up? Okay. Well, this has been a fun discussion, and we still only got through one verse. No, we got through two verses. So we'll be still a little bit more on this next week, but we're starting to wind out of this particular topic. So we'll see. But let's pray.